This is History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians Thornton Kennedy and James Otley.
And welcome back. As we get into our second part of our episode on the history of Georgia's coast, we get into the U-boat attacks. Yes, German submarines sank 5 ships off of Georgia's coast during World War II. And we also get into how a state park helped keep the riffraff off of Sea Island. But first, a word about our sponsor. We're thrilled to partner with Play. Business is serious, but who wants serious stodgy marketing? Check out our friends at Play, a full-service advertising agency. They're deep in the mix with AI and digital know-how, driving more people to your door. And whether it's IRL, in real life, or virtual, Play ensures the right people find you and buy what you're selling. See, there are many case studies at playdesign.com. That's playdesign.com. And start growing your business today. And again, cannot thank our friends at Play enough for sponsoring History for Cocktail Parties. And now, back to our program. James picks up right where we left off. They begin to
either organize the club and ultimately sell it to the Jekyll Island Club.
Right. And I think ultimately they form the Jekyll Island Club exactly like Augusta National.
Yeah.
So Dubinion and Finney formed the Jekyll Island Club, and
it's like right around 1880s.
1886. They purchased the island for $125,000.
Well, that was a lot of money back then.
It was a lot of money back then, but man, it makes me wish I had $125,000 in 1886.
That's right.
You could have. So they marketed it as a winter retreat and a hunting club for wealthy Northerners. 53 people signed up to pay $600 each to belong. Membership capped at 100 in order to keep it super exclusive.
Which it was.
Those early members, Marshall Field, Henry Hyde, J.P. Morgan, Joseph Pulitzer, William Vanderbilt, a virtual who's who of the United States of America.
Right. They said that it represented 1/6 of the world's wealth in that club, the members of that club, and that number is underestimated.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Just to play on that, within 2 decades, a national magazine described it as the richest, most exclusive, most inaccessible club in the world.
That's insane.
Yeah.
What were you telling me about J.P. Morgan's yacht?
His yacht, they built a wharf, but J.P. Morgan's yacht was too big to fit into the wharf, and so he had to moor it out in the Sound. And so he had a cannon that he would fire upon his arrival, and that would signal to, the club employees to come out, row out and get him.
I'd always thought Georgia's beaches were pretty shallow. That was kind of a thing, and that's why you had to dredge all those ports and whatnot, because it's not really deep.
The shelf is very shallow all the way out, I think about a half a mile or more, no, longer than that. And that was one of the reasons, and we'll get into this in a minute, but that's one of the reasons why they thought, we're immune to German U-boats and German attack, because the coastal shelf is so shallow. So shallow that a U-boat would only have like a foot, if that, its cone, if it submerged, it would only have 1 foot over its cone. Yeah. And so it could be easily spotted.
It'd be like seeing a shark in shallow water. It'd be right there, and you'd be like, hey, I can see your gigantic ship just under the water.
I see you.
You're right there.
And so that's why a lot of the coastal communities just ignored the blackout requirements.
It made sense. It will be a little scary in a minute. Ground was broken for the clubhouse in mid-August 1886. The club officially opens in January 1888, designed by a gentleman named Charles Alexander, Chicago. Interesting footnote about Charles Alexander. Jekyll Island Club is not on his Wikipedia page.
Is that right?
He apparently was not so proud of this. Huh. It reflects a Queen Anne style, incorporating into its plan the turret, which dominates the roof line, verandas, bay windows, chimneys, just asymmetrical design, just that classic Queen Anne look that is...
but I don't think at the beginning it had indoor plumbing.
It did. Well,
it had, probably not. And so,
thanks.
They mentioned that one of just the worst jobs to have there as an employee was having to clear out the chamber pots.
Oh, man. Yeah. That's not fun at all. I also heard that none of the cottages had kitchens.
One did, but yes.
One did, but most of the cottages. So just to let our listeners know, The Jekyll Island Club was this clubhouse, and it had rooms above it, but many of the members built these quote-unquote cottages, which were really mansions.
That's right.
They were beautiful mansions, and many of them did not have kitchens.
Well, they had pretty much everything else.
Because you would just walk over, ride your horses over to the club.
That's right. It was a big social event. Every dinner, every meal was social.
I love that.
Yeah. And no, but you're exactly right. And some other things that were kind of interesting. Well, the reason they actually did start building, in fact, the kind of club manager encouraged people to start building houses because it was so popular. People would invite their guests, which were
strangers.
What were they called?
Guests were not called guests; they were called strangers.
Yeah. And so they would fill up the clubhouse, and it got so packed. In fact, that after February, especially during the really busy part of the season, they started banning strangers, or guests, I should say, and. So they couldn't, you couldn't you could only bring your family. The clubhouse filled out.
That's
fascinating.
fascinating.
So they started telling people, go ahead and build your own cottage, even though they were mansions. So that's my understanding of how that happened.
And I don't know if this is the correct terminology, but sanssouci, which translates to without care. The first condominium building in the United States was at Jekyll Island, and J.P. Morgan owned one of the units.
That's right.
And it was
the whole top floor.
It was the whole top floor.
Yeah, I think,
and it's just right there. If you walk out of the front of the club and look out across the croquet lawn, there is the sanssouci. Sanssouci.
There's no sushi there.
No sushi.
Is it part of the hotel now?
No. It's across the way. It's and correct me if I'm wrong. But
I don't know.
I've only been there twice.
But
it's across the way. There is one that is built off the side, but I don't think that's not the one that J.P. Morgan built.
Gotcha. Very cool. Well, they had all sorts of activities there, as you can imagine. The main thing was hunting. But the bicycle craze hit America in the early 1900s. And at the time, they were so expensive that only wealthy people could afford them. So, of course, the Jekyll Island Club hired a bicycle instructor. And so they taught people to ride bicycles.
Was this the bicycle with the gigantic front wheel and the tiny back wheel?
Gosh, that's a great. I don't know. I think these must have been
just a regular old bicycles.
I think so. But even so, they needed an instructor, and but women could ride them. And one of the things that I just learned in my research was that it became, after prices dropped on bicycles, it became a national symbol of liberated women.
Awesome.
Women's liberation. In fact, Susan B. Anthony said that, or credited bicycles with doing more to liberate women than anything else in the world, giving them a sense of freedom, and so
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. Another popular sport there was red bug racing, and those were those go-karts that we posted a picture of on our website, and they go up to 25 miles an hour. They had some.
Did they have an engine?
Yeah, some were.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and some had electric engines, some had gas engines, and somebody replied in a comment that they actually have those, or an iteration of them, still today on Jekyll that you can rent.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's pretty neat.
All right, next time I go to Jekyll, I'm getting a red bug.
Me too.
They look freaking cool.
Yeah, no doubt.
Like a little personal dune buggy.
Right on. And so they'd have these races on the beach. That was one of the activities. Briggs and Stratton made most of them, and they painted them bright red, and they called them or manufactured them as flyers.
Wow.
But because on Jekyll, because they were painted red, and because of the red bugs, those that have down there that live in the Spanish moss. Yeah. They changed the name to red bugs. There were 15 cottages that were built over the years, and like I said, they were built because the clubhouse got too crowded. And if we can, let's take just a minute and talk about
go through the cottages.
A few of them, because it really does. We're describing these cottages. And it's really neat to visit. It's
amazing.
Worth a visit to Jekyll Island to see this place and to know the history, especially after listening to our podcast.
Especially after you learn it.
For a cocktail.
Yeah, to go see these buildings is phenomenal.
So one of the largest one was built by William Teller Crane Jr. in 1918. He was the son of the plumbing magnate Charles Crane. And it was actually so big that it was the only house that they didn't refer to as a cottage. They did call it
just a mansion.
Had 17 bathrooms, formal sunken gardens, and this is a story for another time. But he inherited the Charles Crane fortune, Crane Plumbing, and Charles Crane, interestingly enough, and again we're not going to go into it, but he was on the ship with Leon Trotsky and a group of other Wall Street financiers on their way to Russia to aid in the Bolshevik revolution when Leon Trotsky was stopped in Canada and held by the Canadians because the British didn't want him going there because the Bolsheviks were going to get out of the war, which would be bad for Britain. Oddly enough, another story for another time, but Woodrow Wilson green-lighted his release. So
how crazy.
Could go to Russia.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, Charles Crane, Crane Cottage, same guy.
Who knew?
Yeah. And so when you see plumbing fixtures today that say they have the little crane drawing on there and insignia and whatnot. David King built Madison Square Gardens and the base of the Statue of Liberty. Fun fact. He built a cottage called Chakotah there, and it had one of the first private pools in Georgia.
That's wild.
Edwin Gould, the son of Jay Gould, built Cherokee, and it had a separate playhouse, which they called the casino, which had an indoor tennis court, bowling alley, game room, greenhouse, and indoor shooting range.
Good Lord Almighty.
Joseph Pulitzer, the wealthy editor and publisher, namesake of the Pulitzer Prize, was super sensitive. He built a cottage there. He was super sensitive to noise, so he had the whole house soundproofed. And he is also rumored to have paid a boat captain $100 a day not to blow his horn when he went down Jekyll Creek every morning. Henry Hyde, you mentioned him, of the Equitable Life Assurance Society, the largest life insurance company in the world. He was actually the original builder of Sans Souci, as I understand it. And as you said, it was one of the nation's first condominiums. So one that I want to mention or spend a minute on is Hollyborn, which is a museum today. It was actually featured in the Metro section not too long ago in the AJC, and it was actually you can tour it. Great exhibit, highly recommended. And this was built by Charles Stewart Maurice, who was a co-owner of the world's largest bridge building company, and it was the only house that was built of tabby. And as a result, it did not, the one or two hurricanes that came through, during the club ownership, it was not heavily damaged like the other houses.
Yeah.
Another thing that's kind of unique about the house was that it had trusses in the roof from bridges. And so they didn't have to use a lot of beams and things like that.
That's wild.
So reason that I want to kind of talk a little bit about this house, I was at an event with my dad, and not too long, literally like a week ago, and I was telling him about this upcoming episode we were doing, and he came over to me and said, "James, you need to talk to this lady. She has a story about the house that they built, her family built on Jekyll." And I was thinking, "Oh, thanks, Dad." But
I've already got way too much information.
Yeah, and who wants to hear about one of the little ranch houses? Right. Whatever. It's like, just go talk to her. And it was almost like I was 7 years old. It's like, okay, went to talk to her. And it turns out she is the great-granddaughter of Charles Stewart Maurice.
No way.
Yes, who built
that's crazy.
Hollyborn. And
does she remember going out there?
Her father, she told me some memeries that her father had going out there. And I talked to her, and one of the exhibits in the museum is the two sisters that were really upset with the amount of money that the family was given when the state of Georgia took over the island. It was something like around $12,000 that they were initially offered for the whole mansion, And I asked her about that, and she said, "Oh yeah, Aunt Janie and Aunt Mamie were very upset about that." And they would not set foot in the state of Georgia again. One time, my father was having dinner with them in Aiken, South Carolina, and they were going to go over to Augusta. I said, "No way, we're not going to, And if they ever went down to Florida, they'd make a point of driving around Georgia.
Dude.
And I thought, what are the chances?
What are the chances?
Running into the great-granddaughter. So
that is phenomenal.
Thank you, Ms. McClure, for that information.
Yeah, that's good stuff.
Just a few more stories on the club. They had a taxidermist on hand to mount all of the game that they shot.
That's awesome.
They had a gamekeeper that was in residence who restocked the island each year with with imported French pheasant and quail.
It makes perfect sense because it's an island.
Yeah,
like you could hunt everything to extinction if you didn't continue to bring stuff over.
Because that was their main activity.
That was it. And it's not a big space. No. It's 7 miles long and maybe 1.5 miles wide.
That sounds about right.
So you can walk it fairly easily, and you're shooting every animal on the island?
Right. Luckily, they didn't have them penned up, but almost, They had 20 doctors on staff, most of them from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, because
impressive.
Yeah, yellow fever and malaria was still a thing back then. Also, typhoid. That's a thing. I'm going to tell you about this. So typhoid.
This is such a great story.
Typhoid fever kept breaking out, and the club doctor and the club manager hired a bacteriologist to try and figure out, what was going on. And the club doctor thought, well, it might have something to do that you're dumping the sewer out right where you're keeping the live oysters for the dining room.
Good Lord.
And the bacteriologist came, and he concluded the same thing, but nothing was done. And so...
Hey, so if the doctor comes in and says,
Doctor,
I'm pretty sure this is what it is.
Yeah, right. And they didn't do anything. The next year, tragically, the great-grandmother of the lady I spoke to at the party of the night, Charlotte Maurice, was the wife of Charles Maurice, contracted typhoid fever at the club. This was in 1909 and died later that summer. The club still didn't do anything. They had one more breakout of typhoid fever, and it was finally at that point they investigated again and brought another guy
more
in.
experts.
Yeah, and it's the same people said
your
the same
sewer
conclusion.
water is going directly into your freshwater oysters.
Into the cages where you're keeping the live oysters.
Oh, my good Lord. That's just awesome.
And then the last, and tragic at the same time.
Yeah, I know.
But it shows, it's kind of ironic that, these folks had all the money in the world, but not the science and medical knowledge just, wasn't,
They were not willing to spend the money to move the sewer pipe, or probably easier, move the oyster cages.
How about this, guys? Right.
Just one minor note. Can we get the club employees to pick the cage?
Exactly.
Bring them over here.
Exactly. So also kind of on that same subject, they had all the money in the world, but apparently they had a board meeting on this yacht, and it was overheard. They were actually going to visit Sapelo Island, and it was overheard that the board was squabbling over $250 over whether to build a new shower for the golf caddies or not. I don't know what they decided to do, but it's funny that, again, all the money in the world and still squabble over the details.
Similarities of Augusta National.
Yeah.
Where they were just really tight.
That's right, just like Clifford.
You keep that money because you don't spend it.
That's right. And then the last thing, and I think this is pretty great too, the first transcontinental, not Atlantic, but continental telephone call was made from the Jekyll Island Club. But originally it wasn't supposed to be made from there. The president of AT&T, who's a club member, Theodore Newton Vail, was spending his time on Jekyll, and he was planning to do this call, in a couple of months from New York. They were going to call New York. They were going to, from New York, the main place to call from New York, and call San Francisco, where Alexander Graham Bell and his assistant Watson were going to answer. And then they were going to dial in somehow. Maybe it was the first conference call, too, Woodrow Wilson in D.C. But with all this great food, minus the oysters.
Right. Don't eat the oysters. Everything else is
really
great.
Don't eat the oysters, regardless of whether it's winter or not. All this great food and wine, Mr. Vail developed gout.
Wow.
And he could not travel. He was in so much pain he couldn't travel. So when you're the president of AT&T and the multimillionaire, he had special telephone wires brought down from Savannah to Brunswick and then across the marshes. And not only that, he hired people to patrol every single mile. So if a tree hit it or a storm or something like that, they would be right there.
It could not have been an easy task to get telephone wires out to that island
at
in
that time.
1915.
Can you imagine?
I've driven over that bridge.
Yeah.
I do not understand that. But that's an awesome, just the history of Jekyll Island related to the history of this country is awesome.
Absolutely.
Just so many cool things going on.
So they placed the call. It was a success. But again, it's kind of funny that it was accidental.
It was completely accidental.
Because he developed gout.
That is such a great note, because every time I read that, I think to myself, that does not make a lick of sense. The only way it makes a lick of sense is that the CEO of AT&T had too much to eat and couldn't move off of the couch. Therefore, he had the entire apparatus.
Bring the phone to me.
I can do this. And this sort of gets us to the downfall of the club. I'm just going to skip ahead. It's not
we're
1915.
There. We're there.
But World War II ends up really disrupting club services. A lot of the young employees go off to fight in the war. They can't staff it. They opened it in January. It was open for, I think, 3 days, and then it closed down.
Oh, I didn't even realize they
had opened it that year.
42, I think.
Yeah, 1942. So it was open for 3 days, and then Georgia ordered the evacuation of the island because they were afraid of German U-boats attacking the shores.
And in addition, I mean, that was probably the main reason, but I also read that there was gas rationing. As you said, hard to get employees, and they had 250 when the club was running in its heyday, or under regular situation.
And there are a lot of examples around here. We're in Atlanta, Georgia, obviously. Maybe not obviously, but we're in Atlanta, and there were a lot of big ostentatious houses that were abandoned because you didn't want to have that show while the country was at war and people were making sacrifices.
Right.
So a lot of wealthy people just turned the locks and moved into more simpler accommodations.
I didn't even know
so that being a member of this resort where you eat so much money that you can't eat so much food you can't get up off the couch, it does not reflect well when the country's at war.
Yeah, indeed. And, I also heard that over time, and I think this is the same reason the Carnegies, I think it was, abandoned Cumberland Island, Dungeness, is that the younger generations, they just didn't have the same appeal to them. They wanted to, they had this money, they wanted to show it, they wanted to be flashy, they wanted to go to the French Riviera, and so going to a remote island,
where everybody has to come to you,
which just wasn't not cool,
But the reality is with Jekyll Island, that there was actually a U-boat attack in the vicinity.
There were, not just one. There were 5 Allied merchant ships that were sunk off Georgia shores, and that was in 1941. And originally, Georgia kind of ignored, didn't really prepare. They thought because the coastal shelf was so shallow that U-boats couldn't get in or they could be easily spotted.
And it's pretty far south. It's
absolutely. And
they would bomb. They would hit New York. They would hit Boston. They certainly wouldn't come all the way down.
But there was a lot of economic and impact and a lot of industry in Georgia, a lot of military bases, and so
you had the Liberty ships were being launched at St. Mary's in
Brunswick,
that
area. Yeah, right, exactly. And a lot of the they had these lights out or blackouts that were just ignored because residents thought they're not going to attack us, And one thing I didn't know until I visited the Coast Guard Museum on St. Simons was that blackout. The reason they had these nighttime blackout orders was not because they were worried about the city, Brunswick being attacked. But the light from the shore would, if you had these merchant ships and Navy ships and whatnot that were running with their lights off, for protection. But even with their lights off, if there's light from the shore, that would create a silhouette.
That's how the Oklahoma is sank.
That's exactly right.
The Oklahoma is sank because U-boat commander Reinhard Hartigan spotted the oil tanker Oklahoma silhouetted against the glowing shore off St. Simon's Island.
And sunk it. Yeah.
And sunk it.
Right, absolutely. U-boat, that was a U-boat 123, had actually also sunk the freighter City of Atlanta.
Oh.
Yeah, just a couple of weeks before, actually. And on the Oklahoma, I understand that 23 crew members died.
Yeah.
But there were a lot that were rescued on Coast Guard ships, but also on the private yacht of Howard Candler, who was who was an heir of the Coca-Cola fortune.
That's a great. I love that.
Yeah, I don't know that Howard was, on the boat or captain of that rescue, but it was his boat that was used to rescue these folks.
That's fascinating.
So they did beef up security, and they had these huge. There's another thing I don't think a lot of people know, but they had these huge blimps, submarine hunting blimps, that were out patrolling the coast, and they kept them in these huge wooden hangars right in outside of Brunswick at Glencoe Naval Air Station, which is now the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center, or FLETC, which is a lot of people in St. Simons rent their houses out to Fletzy.
I think some of the coolest historic photographs are those blimps cruising along the coastline. These massive things that are just up there looking for the submarines down below.
And I love the hangars.
The hangars are
big wooden hangars.
Big enough to fit a blimp in, like a parking garage for a fully inflated blimp.
Yeah,
just awesome.
Right here in Georgia. One last kind of funny story on the U-boats. There were never any that I know of, or I don't think we know of any landing of troops, maybe some spies or something like that. But one beach patrol reported seeing what he thought were German tank tracks on the sand on Jekyll Island, and it caused this huge stir.
It came off the submarine.
What it was a giant loggerhead turtle on its way. It was making the tracks. He thought, I guess he wasn't that well trained if he thought. But although I don't know what a loggerhead turtle tracks look like, maybe they do look like tank tracks.
But soldiers were bivouacked on Jekyll Island. Like, it was part of that the mobilization.
Right.
There were soldiers out there on the island. And also, if you want to, you can go out to the northern end on the island, and when it's low tide, you can see this barnacle-encrusted wood metal structure about 16 feet long. It's out in the water there. It was a buoyant apparatus. It was something that was placed there in case a ship was sank. The soldiers could swim to it and hang on to it until they were rescued.
That's so cool that you can still see it today.
You can still see it.
Indeed. So the World War, loss of interest. A lot of
the club never reopens.
Yeah, there were some fortunes that were lost after the Great Depression, and so the club kind of it declines. Almost, yeah. So
and then the state just does eminent domain.
Well, it's funny. I've read different accounts, and I want to get into that. I've read different accounts of whether they actually did do condemnation or eminent domain.
I saw condemnation.
I did too. I see that. But I heard a little bit of a different story, and maybe it was a combination of both. But the real story is fantastic. Is how it actually got to that point.
Right.
And
this is James Otley's specialty right here. This is the real story. We all have this one version.
The rest of the story.
But the rest of the story is so crazy.
So it all begins back in 1926. Howard Coffin, who. Oh man, we got to do a thing on him, but we can't go. He bought Sea Island. He was the developer of Sea Island, the cloister of St. Simons.
Right.
Got the first zoning laws in the country in Glenn County.
Wow.
For his developments. I mean, he not invented but helped design the Packard automobile. I mean,
wow.
Just a
Renaissance man.
Absolutely. And they used that money, put it in airlines. Ended up owning, I think, 1/3 of United Airlines. He got into aviation early. Anyway, had some money to spend, fell in love with the area, owned Sapelo for a long time, develops a cloister, realizes that the public beach, public swimming pool, and the public dance hall on Sea Island has got to go in order for him to realize the vision of a private, exclusive island resort that is Sea Island today. And so he comes to us with this idea. It might have even been his nephew, the first Jones, who said, hey, why don't we build a better facility, a new facility, on the south end of St. Simons where, folks can go and they won't have to, come all the way out here. It'd be
Sea Island's way too far to travel. You can enjoy all these public places right here on St. Simons.
New, beachfront, it'd be even better. And
while they slowly lock the gate
and start charging $25 for a hamburger. Anyway, so Sea Island Company approaches Governor Ellis, who was the governor of Georgia at the time, and with this idea. Glenn County at the time supported the idea. They didn't have the money. They approached Governor Ellis, and he says, "Look, that's a good idea. I'll put $250,000 out of the emergency fund into it, and let's proceed." So Sea Island Company buys this beachfront property. I think it's near the King of Prince. I think it's a little bit north of there, and starts kind of promoting this. Well, immediately, St. Simons residents are like, "No way! We hate this idea. This is all of the probably not in my backyard. We want to go to Sea Island, and all of the anything you can imagine." But it just huge.
It does not go over well.
No.
In St. Simons, they know what.
Yeah, they know the real reason
Right.
behind this, exactly. And so, political nightmare, Arnold backs out of it, and it kind of dies for a minute. So Governor Arnold leaves office. He's one of the three governors in the three governors
right, that whole
controversy,
right.
which we also need to do an episode on.
Yes, 100%.
When the state of Georgia had three governors for a while,
right,
and was the laughing stock of the nation.
Yeah.
I think the secretary or one government officer held the government seal under his cushion in his wheelchair.
You can't make it up.
No, you
it's
can't
so
make
good.
this stuff up. We got to do an episode on that. So anyway, Melvin Thompson becomes the governor,
right.
or at least for a while. Again, that's part of the three governor story. He likes this idea. Jones approaches him. Sea Island Company approaches him. Likes the idea, but he says, look, if it's going to be a state project, it needs to be much bigger than a little
right.
park.
You can't just do a little end of the island park.
So he sets up, what does I say, commission, but the scouts to go out and look for possible places. They scout, all of Georgia, and they've decided, God, Jekyll Island will be perfect for a state park, And so, again, we mentioned that younger members at that time, the club was basically, closed down. Younger members weren't interested. And so at that time, this guy named Vernon Prentice had, I think, succeeded J.P. Morgan as the president of the Jekyll Island Club. And from my research, he convinces most of the members, not all, not the Maurice family, but most of the members, to sell their interests back to the club and maybe
right.
with exchange for just like a membership or something like that, because they couldn't maintain them, and
right.
et cetera, et cetera.
Everything's falling into disrepair. It hasn't been inhabited in
right.
years.
Right. And so Prentice, who's the president, Sea Island Company, and another member, Frank Gould, who's the youngest son
right.
of Jay Gould.
Jay Gould. Interesting.
As I understand it, have a partnership, and the three of them own a good portion of Jekyll Island Jekyll Island
right.
Club. Okay, so they realize, look, in this age of the motor car, we need a causeway built. If we're going to bring this club back to life, we need a causeway, and it's going to cost $1 million. Gould says, look, I'll offer to finance this, but like within a year, he dies of a heart attack.
Interesting.
And unfortunately,
right.
or fortunately or unfortunately, his 1/3 interest goes to his second wife, who then gives the 1/3 of the island or the interest to a New York trust and estates attorney to pay the legal bill. And this guy's name is Condon, Mr. Condon Esquire.
Right.
And he's this guy has just coincidentally helped to rebuild a couple of clubs in New York, the River Club, and also the Maidstone Club in East Hampton. He says, we can make a go of this again. Sea Island Company.
Really? So he gets behind opening Jekyll Island back up as a result?
Yeah. And he has gotten the interest because Frank Gould has died. And it's right about this time that Governor Thompson selects Jekyll as the perfect site, for the state. And so he offers to buy the island. And, Jones and Prentice are like, look, we don't think that we can make a go of this. This island is going to, we need to go ahead and do it. And but Condon's kind of the holdout, and so they travel up to New York, and along with a representative of Governor Thompson, and I think that's where at least they make the threat that, like, look, if you don't sell it, we're going to condemn it, and you're going to get a lot less money. And so the sale goes through. The amount, I have seen different amounts. I've seen $687,000. I've seen $674,000. And you might have.
I've got $675,000,
right,
plus the condemnation order.
Okay, so it must have been, like I said, I wish it must have been at least partially, part of it must have been condemned.
Well, but just by your anecdotal story of the sisters being pushed out of their land,
right. So maybe
something happened.
Maybe they bought part of it from people from the the partnership was willing to sell, but then they had to condemn. But
that's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Exactly. So incidentally, Sea Island still had this property that they had bought north of the King.
That's right. Prince. I completely forgot about the fact that there was this other park.
Sometimes my stories go on like that. But going back to the beginning, so they donated 600 feet of the property they had purchased as beachfront property to the county.
Right.
And that is Massengale Park that you see today.
Yeah.
So you drive past that, and that's how that part came into being, and how
And Sea Island ends up giving us Jekyll Island as a public Georgia park.
Yeah, basically, because it all started trying to get what they saw as riffraff.
Right. Get the
public.
riffraff off of my island.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to the Jekyll Island Club?
I have a couple of times, and as I said, it is absolutely worth. In fact, there's some pictures on our History of Cocktail Parties website. The Aldrich Room and whatnot, and it is I highly recommend visiting the club, doing the tour, and seeing the houses. And you can get into Hollyborn and some of the other cottages.
And they're great bike paths. But I really prefer to stay over on that historic district because it's just so pretty. And the marshes of Glen, as the great Sidney Lanier wrote the poem about, it's just a beautiful piece of property and beautiful buildings. Definitely worth checking out. So that concludes our journey to Jekyll Island. We wanted to come back and give that history, and I think it's a rich, interesting history from Sir Joseph Jekyll to World War II.
Absolutely.
It is a fascinating story. And James, I'm glad you mentioned our social media channels. We are on TikTok. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We are even on LinkedIn. So just search wherever you can for History for Cocktail Parties. We're updating constantly.
And again, I want to thank our sponsor, Play LLC.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Enjoyed it. Thank you for listening to History for Cocktail Parties with hack historians James Otley and Thornton Kennedy. Please like and subscribe. And now that the episode's over, you can go pour yourself another round, and we'll catch you next time.